is a difference between the sort of votive side of religion and the mystery side of religion, the side which involves social interactions and the side which involves a kind of inner experience. And it's true that a lot of these explanations we've been discussing are to do with religion as a social phenomenon, but there is something else as well, which is the mystical experience. But of course, that's not to say that that has got no explanation. There's a variety of competing psychological explanations for that, to do with behaviour of the temporal lobes and various other sorts of theories. Many of them, certainly one of them is true, and many of them have a great deal more plausibility than the idea that any religious claim is true. So I think the conclusion would be that religion obviously has a variety of explanations because it covers a variety of phenomena.
And science.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I would say about
then we'll move on to religion.
Is that, of course, there have been, as you said, Nicky, thousands of gaps, as in things we couldn't explain at the time. Every single one of them that has been explained by science hasn't been explained by religion. So we've got about as good evidence as you could possibly have that no gap concerning our understanding can be filled by these religious beliefs. On the point about mystery, I mean, I agree that in a sense, one needn't be a materialist or something. You can certainly think that there are other things in life, there are things that have value to people and so on, but people can have value for each other. People can care about things that matter, like music, the arts or science, one another, personal relationships, political activism.
And Arif earlier on said that science has explained so many things and religion explains none of these things that science has explained. This is not what religion is about. Religion, and I would include many scientific religions in this.
What's scientific religion?
Secular religions, which are scientistic. In other words, they have faith in science as producing all the answers, all the understanding and so on.
It's not faith.
But let me finish. Well,
hang on. That's a very vital point to get a quick response on before we proceed. Arif?
Just on that particular point, it's a common trope amongst theists, and it's a completely false to say that science is some kind of faith. There is no better evidence for anything than there is for any of the many scientific theories I could mention, like quantum theory. Are you saying quantum theory is a faith? Yeah. I mean, I think one thing about Islam is that actually, in many ways, Islam is very focused on life in this world in a way that Christianity isn't. So, for instance, Islam places constraints on a great deal of people's everyday behaviour that Christianity doesn't. It constrains your financial transactions, it constrains your personal hygiene, it constrains the way you dress, it constrains a vast amount of people's lives. So in many ways, it's
very negative term.
Totalitarian. And the other thing I would say is that, of course, Islam is not the only one. These other religions do, but many religions have a very severe and deleterious effect on people's lives in this world. If you think all the people who are homosexual and the things they've suffered because of religion.
All the people everyone's conscience is totalitarian.
All the things that are going on in Raqqa
everybody's conscience is totalitarian
right now because of your religion.
Everyone's conscious. That might be easy for you to say, but everyone's conscious. Everyone's conscience is a totalitarian. Everyone's conscience guides them throughout the entire day.
What do you mean everyone's conscience is totalitarian?
Yes, because...
What does that mean?
Well, totalitarian means if it encompasses every aspect of your life. So we would like to think that a person's conscience would guide them through every aspect of their life. What they do, how they treat people, helping people and so on. Everyone's conscience is totalitarian. You're just saying the word, this is totalitarian.
Do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
A person who does not have a totalitarian conscience is a hypocrite who acts on pragmatic principles which are selfish. And not based on higher principles.
My conscience doesn't tell me I should prostrate myself in a certain direction 5 times a day.
Arif, do you think that belief is explainable in terms of natural selection and evolution? If we reach a certain cognitive level, then you can explain the thunderbolts, you can explain the rainbows, and you can see significance in things.
That's right. I mean, there are theories concerning how religious beliefs came to exist in the first place, and I think that religious belief may well have some natural basis. For instance, and this is a theory that goes back at least to David Hume, which is that people do have a natural tendency, and indeed there's an evolutionary advantage in having a natural tendency to be over-credulous about there being some kind of agency behind the phenomena that you observe. So, for instance, the marginal benefits of being slightly too credulous that the thing you see moving is a snake rather than, a stone or something, are clear.
What's the advantage?
Well, the advantage is that you run away more often than you need to. But running away more often than you need to is much safer than running away less
Survival
often.
thing, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
but surely as well it's being able to be the guy who can explain stuff See that thunder?
Well,
That's
yeah, sure.
thunder.
I mean, that comes later.
You have more successful breeding.
That's right. No,
I don't know whether we can actually sort of chronologically chop it up and say this comes then, this comes then. I think humanity has always been a big bag of Haribo, assorted sweets, and many different types in there.
Yeah, listen, she had me for talking donkeys. I'm going to have a go at you for a big bag of Haribos.
The one point at which I think we agree on is that there is, whatever the explanation is for religious belief, certainly the explanation isn't in terms of the evidence for it. There is just no evidence at all that the universe was made by a man with magic powers, or that somebody came back from the dead, let alone the talking donkeys or the talking snakes, or any of the other stuff that they try and palm off on us. And we've known this for centuries.
That's symbolic.
We've known this for centuries.
If God is outside space and time, you're dragging God into the wrong place. Yeah,
it's funny, they only started saying it was symbolic when the evidence became really clear that it was literally false.
Yeah.
Before that, they didn't.
Yeah. You missed church this morning, didn't you? Just a second. Arif, you've been dying to come in.
Thanks. I mean, I think we have strayed a little bit off some of the topics, but some of what Hamza said seemed to me to be platitudes, and some of it seemed to make no sense at all. But one thing that I did get was that it's correct to say that there are a lot of things that we don't know, and none of you know it any more than we do, but you give it some divine label, whereas we don't. On the specific arguments, I mean, coming back to your apparent refusal to understand any of the points that Adam was making, if we look at the specific argument concerning the so-called fine-tuning of the universe for life, that is to say, the particular values of certain physical constants is so specific that had it been different by, say, 1 part in 10 to the power of 100 or something, there would have been no life in the universe. That's the argument. That argument assumes that this dispensation would have been very unlikely to have arisen by chance. We have no reason whatever to think that. The only reason to think that something like that is unlikely is if we have some grounds for establishing some particular probability distribution in advance. The only way to establish such a distribution in advance is through repeated trials of universes being created. To date, excuse me, let me finish. To date, we have one universe that we've observed, in which we observe it to have happened. Could one of you please give me some reason, any reason, for thinking that there is a uniform rather than other probability distribution for those constants? Perhaps you'd like to, Reddy, seeing as you raised the argument.
If I can jump in. I mean, you take one of those constants, the explosive force of the Big Bang. If it's the slightest bit weaker, the universe collapses back in on itself almost immediately. If it's the slightest bit stronger, the universe just disperses into thin air. You don't get anything like the complexity that would be necessary for life. The way I see this argument from fine-tuning, and it's the one thing so far that we've actually agreed on both sides, that actually the parameters for life are incredibly narrow. It would be like showing up and seeing a game of cards, watching someone get a dozen royal flushes in a row, and then you know that outcome.
But did we not? Can I just ask Vince? Can I ask you a question? Did we not? The possibility of science is that we evolved to be compatible with that fine tuning, and that's why we're here.
Well, no, but the
rather
example,
than fine tuning being created.
But Nikki, the example that I gave, in terms of the explosive force of the Big Bang, if you just conceptualize it, it's the slightest bit stronger. It literally disperses into thin air.
Okay, Vince,
there's nothing complex. There's nothing complex at all. The slightest bit weaker, it actually just collapses back in on itself.
That's all very interesting, but he hasn't answered the question. Can any of you give me a reason for thinking that the distribution of those constants was uniform?
Let Arif make that point.
That is exactly right. Let me give you an example. So supposing that, for instance, the first person who examined a snowflake under a microscope looked at it and said, oh, look, it's a beautiful, perfect crystalline structure. Isn't this amazing? I must have a really special snowflake. What's the chances that a snowflake would have this particular structure? Because it's the first one he's seen. There's no reason whatever to think the distribution of patterns in snowflakes is uniform.
We both agree that there could be lots of other types of possible universes that would not include life. On the hypothesis that God does not exist, there's no reason to think that it would be likely that we would get one of the.
Okay, I want to move. Let's wait, please.
Nobody has answered my question. It would be interesting if anybody could. Nobody has answered the question.
We need to move on. That's all I'm saying. Atheism, interesting. You were exercised by that. Why is he wrong, do you believe, to say that atheism, being a belief system, is a kind of religion?
It's an absence of a belief system. So by definition, it can't fall into the same category as having faith or having a religious framework with which in which you live your life. That isn't a belief system. It is the opposite of a belief system.
Arif?
Yeah, can I just say something what Adam said is absolutely right. It is indeed the absence of a belief system. I myself, if that's what atheism is, I myself am more than an atheist, because I positively believe that there is no God, just as I believe that there are no fairies, no Father Christmas, Elvis wasn't resurrected, because we have the same amount of evidence for all of those claims, fairies, Father Christmas.
Yes, sir.
But can I finish, please?
Okay, finish.
If you let me finish, I think you'll find you agree with me.
Sure.
Because the point is that, of course, if the question is how can people who think that explain how, for instance, human beings have so much knowledge that they do, there are perfectly good explanations. If you want to know how we can know about the Andromeda Galaxy, I can tell you how telescopes work. If you want to know how we're so good at organising society, it's through a process of trial and error.
But his point is that if evolution is, tell me if this is your point, if evolution is the sole guiding principle of human development, that is aimed at survival, not at truth. And if that's the case, then it sounds a bit like we get on the scale and we think it should tell us the time. Why should we believe that our thoughts and our beliefs?
Yes, but let me go. Wait, everybody, please. Let me go back to you, and then we'll get another point from you.
I think my point was missed out. Look, you can believe in evolution and believe in a creator. There's no contradiction between the two. That wasn't my point. My point was purely from an atheistic paradigm, right? That there is no God, there is no intelligence behind this universe, right? Assuming, say, Darwinian evolution is true, even though science is based on induction, it can be wrong. Assuming it's true, how can you trust your mind when your mind is a product of a blind evolutionary process which doesn't have an end goal? If the end goal is pure rationality, then we should have the same rationality.
The mind has evolved and survived for 200,000 years.
But you're missing the main point, and no atheist here has actually answered that so
Well, let me just...
Arif, answer that point.
Yes, can I just answer? Of course we can explain it, because the search for truth, looking for truth, is a very good means to surviving. The truth about what drug cures this disease is a very good way for prolonging our survival, and it's our atheistic science that you will rely on. There is a general argument that I would like to see addressed, which of course covers the issues about resurrection, as well as Moses and demons and all of these other reports that we supposedly have concerning these events, which is Hume's argument, which is decisive and straightforward, and the argument is as follows. Everybody agrees, including all religious people, that the vast majority of reports of miracles are made by people who are wrong and deluded. Christians believe that about Muhammad. All Islamists believe that about Jesus. Everybody else believes it about both of them. Okay? They all believe it about the 10,000 or so prophets of all of the other false religions, which everyone in this room agrees are false. So we all agree that the vast majority of reports of religion are made by people who are deluded.
I don't think Joan does believe
the second claim... No, hang on.
No, you can in a minute.
No, because the second part of the argument...
I want to hear from Vishnu. After he's finished his point, we will have a chance.
Therefore, in each particular case, we therefore have to ask ourselves, which is more likely? There are no documented cases of resurrections. There are millions of documented cases of people who believe in, for instance, Elvis or these other people who they thought were resurrected. In this case, which is more likely, we'll just have to look at what's more frequent.
I appreciate what you're saying, but you assume that God does not exist and then make certain assumptions about how we should view the scriptures. Now, one of my colleagues, Richard Swinburne, he's someone who I think is as committed to evidence as you are. Okay, his book in 2003, The Resurrection of God Incarnate, I know you will vastly disagree with this, but he looks at the evidence in a probabilistic way. He likes to work with probability theory. He comes to the conclusion that it's 97% probable. Now, I don't expect you to agree with that, but he is probably the most influential British philosopher of religion of the last 2 generations. No one can say he doesn't take evidence seriously. There are arguments on both sides of this debate, but you can come by the evidence to a conclusion strongly that God exists. And if that's the case, then a lot of your beliefs about Scripture
Could I please make 2 points about... Could I please make 2 points? So the first one about the Swinburne book is that Swinburne starts with absurd prior probabilities that he plucks completely out of the air and cannot be justified.
But the more general
point that I want to make, which goes back actually to some of the things that the grown-ups here, like Miriam and Adam, have been...
It's a bit patronising to some people.
Yes, it's meant to be. It's not meant to be polite.
Very quickly.
But to get onto that issue, is that the Bible does nothing better than can't be found elsewhere. Its physics is worse than Newton's. Its spirituality is worse than Plato's. Its ethics in spiritual translation of that worse than Shakespeare's. We can find that elsewhere. We can find the
Okay,
philosophy
listen.
elsewhere.
We've run out of time. We've run out of time. Well, time's up. We certainly sorted that out. We'll see you next week.